You've landed on the Lonely Diplomat podcast, and wherever you are in the world, welcome. I'm Phil McAuliffe. I'm the Lonely Diplomat, and it's simply wonderful to be here in your ears for episode 41 of the Lonely Diplomat podcast. In this episode, before I jump into it, the podcast for the last over 10 episodes now has focused on responding to issues that you raise with me as members of my awesome global audience of diplomats and those who live the diplomatic life. It's an honor and it's a privilege of mine to serve, support, challenge, and inspire you as you live your diplomatic life, no matter where in the world you live it. I don't care, remember, what you do or how you, or where you do it or for whom you do it. I care about you as a diplomat and those living, and someone living the diplomatic life, and all about helping you be awesomely yourself, be you as you do your job, because the world really is waiting for you to be you. The world really needs you to be you. So that's what my work is all about. And if you want me in your corner as someone to serve, support, challenge, and inspire you directly, live, in real time, as you live your diplomatic life, I would love to be in your corner. And you can find out about my mentoring services on my website, thelonelydiplomat.com. And also on that side, you will see my blog, which has a lot of blog posts on it, all designed to help and challenge you as you live your diplomatic life. Noticing a theme here, and also this podcast and details of how you can get my book in ebook or hard copy through Amazon. Anyway, with all of that said, just know how grateful I am that you are here and that we're having a chat. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're doing well. You and yours are doing well. This episode of the Lonely Diplomat podcast, we're going to be talking something a little fun. And I get this all the time from members of my awesome global audience, almost just in comments, not like, Phil, there's a problem, please, can I get your insight? But I get this all the time. Just as a sort of general wry observations of the living of a diplomatic life. And I get this within myself all the time as I live my diplomatic life, and that's around accent misunderstandings. And it's a reflection of the world that in English, particularly in English, and that's the source of my lived experience, that there is a version of English that is widely understood, reflecting popular culture, and that's having a North American accent. And for those of us who don't have English as a first language, or have an accent that is different to what is the norm, one of the constants of our diplomatic life is accent misunderstandings. And they're funny. They're really funny. They can be really funny. And many of us over time, knowingly or not, end up editing, adjusting, adapting our accents so we can be understood. Because it does get a bit tiring trying to explain something when naturally you don't say the letter R, or your vowels might come out differently to say the same word, that is the same word when written down in many, many, many different ways. And there's beauty. There really is beauty in the difference. When you stop and think about it, there's beauty in the difference of the perception of how a word is pronounced, the same word, how it's pronounced. But if you don't say it in the way that others are expecting it, you can find yourself having to adapt. And those of us who have kids who live the diplomatic life, it's amazing to see how quickly our children adapt their speech and their accent to be understood. And whether it's a conscious thing or unconscious thing, I don't know. But I think it's amazing to see how adaptable it is. And I have an Australian accent. I'm Australian, but it's funny. The number of comments that I get saying, you don't really have a strong Australian accent, or you don't sound Australian. And in New Zealand, a couple of very funny instances where I would say a word that would out me with my Australian accent as an Australian, and someone saying, almost like I was in a coffee shop. I said something about something being delicious, and saying it in that way made it, outed me as an Australian. And the whole coffee shop just kind of went quiet. And the woman serving me said, "Are you Australian?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes. I'm not sure how to answer that question, but yes, I am sure." And she's like, and she sort of stared at me a little bit. Just, I didn't know. And it was funny, very funny, but awkward. And she's like, and then, "But you don't seem Australian." I'm like, okay, I really don't know what that's meant to mean. Whether that's meant to be that, I'm meant to be drunk and obnoxious, I don't know. I don't know what that means. But slowly but surely, the other people who worked in the cafe said, "Yeah, I've lived in Australia." Me too. I love living in Australia. It's great. I love Melbourne. I love, whatever it is. And, but it was one of these moments, is like, almost how could you not tell us that you were Australian? And stuff. And I'm sure you have lots of different examples. And another one that I want to say is not having a North American accent. I would go, and one of my examples are in coffee shops. There's probably something in there for all of us. But I would go to Starbucks in Seoul. And those of you who are familiar with Seoul know that everywhere you turn, I'm not exaggerating, everywhere you turn, you can see a Starbucks. And within the radius of where I worked, there were I think nine within about 2-block radius of where I worked. Some were on the street, some were in bookstores, some were underground, but 9 Starbucks. I'm going to say probably a problem there if you've got 9 Starbucks in 2 blocks, in a 2-block radius. But anyway, I remember going into, it was a hot afternoon in Seoul, and I went to go and get a iced coffee. And I went in my finest Korean, ordered a coffee. I'm pretty good at ordering coffee in different languages. And we could call it a survival mechanism. And I, flawlessly, I thought, asked for coffee. And now anyone else who's learnt, a language, and I'm going to say that's probably a lot of you over the course of your career and you're living a diplomatic life, you've picked up, either learned, in a classroom setting, in a tutor setting, how to speak the language, and you can speak it very well, or you learn it kind of through osmosis. And I, great at having conversations, but as soon as it deviated from the script, I was done. I was done. There was no like banter in Korean for me. Like, no, sorry, this wasn't in the dialogue that I practiced in class, so I don't understand what you're saying. And anyway, I ordered coffee and kopi americano 주세요. And they, the person serving me said, hot or iced? Very complicated. It's, the English words, hot or iced. And I said, I said hot. I wasn't getting a nice coffee, I was getting hot. And I said hot. And she looked at me, and it was one of those moments that, if I was a cartoon, there'd be like a bead of sweat forming on my forehead, and I'm not quite sure. Like, I know what you're answering, and I'm answering. I'm saying hot, and she went and like was sort of looking at me, and I'm like, do I say not iced? Or what? I'm like, oh, I'm hot. And I just kept on saying it. And of course, like, someone who doesn't understand you obviously is hard of hearing. So you say it louder. And I was very grateful for the person next to me in line, who was showing an inordinate amount of patience for all of this, especially in a queue for a coffee, said, hot. And everything was understood then. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I've been saying. I said hot, but no. Anyway, as I was waiting for my coffee, I looked up on the board at the menu and was reading the Korean side and noticed that it's, hot coffee and iced, like hot Americano, iced and stuff. And the word for hot was in Korean, like H-A-T. And as I said it, as I read it out loud in Korean, and I can read Hangul like I'm about 5 years old, and sort of sounded out the letters and looked at it and went, hot. I need to say it like an American. So it felt a little weird within me. I felt like I was I'm struggling to not say the words take the piss, but make fun of an American accent every time I ordered a hot coffee from Starbucks, and saying, kopi americano 주세요, hot 주세요. And everyone got along with their day, and I just felt a little bit dirty in saying that. This is a really, kind of minor story, and I'm sure me sharing those two stories has brought up a whole lot of memories of accent confusions and fun kind of cross-communication moments, through the time that you've lived your diplomatic life. And I hope it's bringing a smile to your face. Those memories bringing a smile to your face. But there is something that I want to raise in the sharing of these stories with you. And in reflecting on these accent difficulties that we can encounter, that we do encounter, as a lovely part of living this diplomatic life. And that actually they can test our resilience. They can test our resilience depending on where they catch us, how we're feeling within ourselves, how we're feeling about where we are in the world, how we might be feeling frustrated, we might be feeling a bit angry, we might be feeling lost within ourselves, or lost, in a new place. And the frustration that we can feel is real. It might seem minor, but this is actually really a test. These examples can really test our resilience. And this is a concept that I explored back in April 2020 in a blog post on resilience. And it brings up the concept that it was shared with me before writing that. It actually inspired the writing of it. The concept of big resilience and little resilience. And big resilience is a kind of resilience that we can prepare for before going somewhere. So if we know that it's actually going to be a dangerous place that we're getting, that we're going to go and live and work for a little while, we can actually prepare for that. If we know that it's going to be hot, if we know that, there's that word again. So for those of you who don't understand that was hot. And if we know it's going to be, in a tropical country or a cold country, if we know it's going to be, cold city, cold climate, warm climate, if we know that it's going to be, electricity is going to be unreliable, or that it's going to be hard to get certain things, or whatever it is, we can make preparations for that. We can make preparations for that before we go. We can get help and support and all of that kind of stuff to help us before we go, as we're there, and when we come back. But it's the little things that we couldn't possibly understand, which in many circumstances are fun and charming, but then in other circumstances, it might catch you in the aisle of the supermarket crying because you don't know what the ingredients are on something. And something, buying something off the shelf at the supermarket that, you're aware, it's like your brand that you get every single time you go to the supermarket, turns into checking everything to make sure that, you're not allergic to ingredients, or that someone in your family is not allergic to it, or it's going to be, similar to what you are used to, because you want some comfort and reminders of home. And so something, the supermarket is brilliant, as buying food is a brilliant example of this. Where we live in the world, sometimes we can get in and out of a supermarket buying food on autopilot. We just kind of know where things are and we go and get it. But when we go to a new place where we don't speak the language, we're not familiar with how things are done, something that takes, half an hour, maybe an hour at home can take 3-4 hours. It can turn into a whole day adventure. And if we're not in, a mindset to accept that as an interesting adventure, it can actually really test our resilience. And the critical thing is we need to allow it to be a test of our resilience. We need to allow ourselves to go, yeah, that was actually really frustrating. That was a bit frustrating. And because it's okay, generally it's okay to be tested, have our resilience tested by the big things. That's all known. So many people know it, and we've all made preparations for it. But each and every one of us, in our own ways, gets tested. Whether it's in a line at Starbucks in Seoul, or whether it's in a coffee shop in Wellington that you've gone to for months, and they know your name, but not that you're Australian. Those things are allowed to test your resilience. And denying those actually, because, and by denying, a huge indicator of the word that we're denying it is looking, when we hear ourselves say the word should. I shouldn't be feeling that way. What's wrong with me? Like, this should just be easy. No. Accepting what is and allowing ourselves to be as we are in that moment, which includes being overwhelmed, knowing that this will pass, helps with our psychological resilience enormously. We come back to form. We're flexing. We're allowing ourselves to come back to form. So while this has been a fun topic, and I really do hope that accent misunderstandings has got you smiling as you listen to this and you're reflecting on your own. And I'd love to hear your stories. Know that you're allowed that these little things that seem trivial when compared to others. There's another clue. You're comparing how you're feeling to how you should be feeling because other people have had it worse than you and they're coping just fine. You're allowed to accept. Indeed, we need to accept what is and work from that to find ways of recharging ourselves in that moment. So if you want to share yours with me and you want my insight and advice as you lead your diplomatic life, please reach out on socials, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and send me an email. Or send me an email. You don't have to do all of those. And send me an email, admin@thelonelydiplomat.com. Links in the episode description. And yeah, thank you so much for when you do reach out to me, sharing some of those stories. They're a very good way of bonding. I love them, and I hope that me sharing those two stories and sort of me confronting my caffeine addiction have brought a smile to your face wherever you are in the world. Does sound like you're getting ready to leave those. So until next time, be awesomely and humanly you, because the world really does need more you.